I've been waiting 5 years to tell this story. In 2021, I was working 2 jobs as a graphic designer that I hated. My creativity was withering on the vine, and my wallet was in no better shape. I had maxed out credit cards, $10,000 in debt, and literally at the grocery store, at the checkout, had to put the groceries back because I had no way of paying for them. Most days felt like a race between losing my mind and going homeless. Something had to change. I knew I could do better. Something just had to click. And finally, I feel like I can tell the story about what did. So this story starts, like all modern stories, with the pandemic, the COVID lockdowns, 2020 I'm talking. At that time, I was living in New York City. I was in school, and they hit us with that 2-week shutdown. And I thought to myself, well, if I'm going to be locked down, I should probably go to the grocery store. And as I say this, I'm realizing a lot of things happened in my life at the grocery store, pivotal moments. This was one of them. I waited in line to get into the grocery store, and I will never forget. I walk in, and literally the only food on the shelves, French onions and cake frosting. I said, this ain't me. I'm not here. I walked back from the store to my apartment and immediately booked a flight back to St. George, Utah, where my parents lived, to pass the time in a town with stores that had groceries. Well, we all know how long the 2-week lockdown lasted, and I found myself a graphic designer in a small town needing to make a living. Not a lot of opportunities. So I took what I could get, and I got a job as a graphic designer for a female fitness brand that, unsurprisingly, had no taste. I spent most of my time designing Facebook ads to convince women to act fast and buy now. And to do so, I was getting paid just enough money to make a living if I moved back in with my parents. So I got a second job. This one was a little more enjoyable. I was an adjunct professor at the university in my hometown, teaching graphic design. And while it was enjoyable, it paid about as well as convincing women on Facebook to act fast and buy now, which is to say, it did not pay well. During the first 2 weeks of the 2-week lockdown, I met a girl. And I had a feeling that this girl was exactly what I was looking for in a girl. So I decided I was going to do everything I could to convince her to act fast, buy now, and marry me. Luckily, I didn't have to do that because she also felt like I was the type of boy that had exactly what she was looking for in a boy. As a side note to all you boys out there who are looking for the perfect woman who wants to marry a boy who hates his job and lives with his parents, I'm sorry to tell you there was only one in the entire world, and I already married her, so you're out of luck. But I say all this to say that on December 3rd, 2020, I got married. And if you know anything about getting married, it ain't cheap to get married. Plus, fast approaching was the time to go back to school. I was able to defer a year, take a year off, but a year is all they would give me. So, a few months married with my new little family, I was moving back to New York City. After paying safety deposit, first month's rent, last month's rent, and some sneaky realtor fees, I, my wife, 2 suitcases, and a bank account with negative $10,000, boarded a plane so we could go to New York City so I could go back to grad school. And now this grad school, it wasn't just any grad school. This was the School of Visual Arts where I would be learning from the likes of Brian Collins, Stefan Sagmeister, and the late Milton Glacier, may he rest in peace. But with this quality of education came a huge time commitment. I am zero exaggerating when I tell you this. I kept track of the time I spent in class and designing that first semester, and I regularly, more often than not, put in 100 plus hours a week of work. Often working all day, staying up, working all night, and through all day the next day. Now I'm going to say this, I'm no fan of rise and grind, hustle culture. That is not my vibe. But there is a time and there is a place, and this was a rare opportunity. And I did what I needed to do to make it work for me. But I tell you this to say that I knew once grad school started back up, I was going to have no time for a job, not even a part-time job. But I saw it coming. Luckily, when I took that year off, I had 12 months to prepare for this. Now, it doesn't mean I wasn't in panic mode. I only had 12 months to figure out a way to make a living, to pay rent, to buy groceries without a job. But now, I was lucky enough, fortunately, to be raised by a father who believed that the only stink more potent than the breath of Lucifer himself was the smell of a 9 to 5. He was an entrepreneur. I also, being in a small town, being a graphic designer, worked for small businesses. So I was surrounded by people who were trying to make a living doing their own thing outside of a 9 to 5. And luckily, by osmosis or some unforeseen, undeserved divine gift, I soaked in some of this. And I came up with a plan. I came up with a genius plan. I'm a whisper the plan and be close to the camera because it's so good we can't let anybody know this plan. I was going to make and sell fonts online. Now, this was the perfect business. For some time now, I had been wanting to try my hand at making fonts. And the software to design fonts only cost like $50. I could swing that. I was only working 2 jobs, so on nights and weekends I had the time to learn to make fonts. And here's the best part of all. Once I made a font once, I could sell it 1,000,000 times. No shipping, no inventory. It was all automatic. I was gonna make money while I slept. Or rather, make money while I didn't sleep and worked on design in grad school. The clock was ticking and I put my plan into action. I had 12 months to make it work. And then I had 11 months to make it work. And then 10. And then 7. And suddenly my genius plan, after 5 months of work, had made me $6.60. Now let me drive this point home. I had been slaving away nights and weekends after my 2 jobs to build a business that was now providing me with a luxurious 1-figure income. This was February. School was starting in August. The time was rapidly approaching where I was going to have to tell my wife that I can't provide for her. I dreaded the day where I was going to have to tell her, hey, I can't make it work. We're going to have to move back in with your parents. Which, looking back at, she probably would have been fine with, seeing how she agreed to marry me when I was living with my parents. But remember, I was in the depths of despair and was not thinking clearly. I was in a bad way. But I digress. The clock continues to tick. I was all in and it was not working. But I had to make it work. So, at this point, I reached out for help. Always a good play. In my desperation, I just emailed everybody I could find or think of that I thought might be making a living selling typefaces online. Of all the emails I sent, I got exactly one response from Tom Cunningham, the designer and owner of Tropical Type. Bless his heart. Tom looked at my work. He believed in me. He was very generous with his advice. I listened to him. I did everything he said. And I will tell you, February 2021, that month, I made $295.20. And let me say this, the difference between one figure and three figures is liberating and motivating like you cannot believe. The next month, March, I made $937.80. And I was in business, baby. Now you might ask yourself at this point, what is this magical advice that Tom gave you? Don't worry, that's coming, but that's another video. But back into it, long story short, that year, I ended up making $30,000. I was able to pay rent, I was able to buy groceries, and by the time I graduated, I was even able to pay off that $10,000 credit card debt. And yes, by the skin of my teeth, I was able to graduate. That's also a whole other story for a whole other video. But this story doesn't end here. We got downs and ups and downs again, baby. Because now that I was a graduated master, you can call me Master Harbor if you want. It was time to fill the dream, to live it finally, to get an awesome job in New York City as a cool designer at a cool studio, working with other awesome designers on dream projects. And I did that for 3 months, and I hated it. You see, I got a little taste of the glory. See what it tastes like. I got a little taste of that financial and creative freedom. And I couldn't go back to that 9 to 6, which is the New York version of the 9 to 5. I couldn't do it. Building someone else's dream. Getting that 5% raise every year. Everything I ever thought I wanted. But what Elphaba say? I don't want it anymore. I'm coming for you, Cynthia. I just couldn't do it. I was miserable. I ended up telling my wife, listen, I can't do it. I can't be happy and have a job. I can do one or the other. And my wife, to her credit, she believed in me. She said, quit that job. You'll figure it out. You'll make it work. I said, okay, we're going to have to move away from New York City, which at the time, the average rent was $4,000. She said, okay, let's move to France. And we did that for a month. And then she said, I'm pregnant. And I said, let's move back in with your parents. And she said, I would love that. And so we did that. In 2023, we moved in with the in-laws. We did everything we could to make it work. We lived as cheap as we possibly could. I did everything I possibly could to build my business, design and sell fonts. And 2023 was a slog. But we made it work. And I'm happy to say that in 2024, without a job, with my little one-person design business, I was able to make over $100,000. But more importantly than the money, remember, I had the money when I was working my fancy-dancy New York design job. More importantly than the money is I am living my dream life. I love what I do for work every day. Last year, 2024, I worked about 4 hours a day. And I even took 2 months off almost entirely when my son was born. I still live with my in-laws, and I love it. I love spending time with my family. I exercise. I eat healthy. I volunteer in my church. I help those around me when I can, how I can. I'll tell you what I don't do. I don't buy new clothes often. I don't drive a fancy car. I don't use a smartphone. I don't go on fancy vacations. But that's me, and it works for me. And I tell you this whole story, because it is a story that I want more designers to be able to tell. Not with the same points in the exact same way, but I want to be able to help designers who are where I was 5 years ago, creatively unfulfilled, maybe financially hurting. I want to help them be where I am now. Now, I had a lot of help getting from point A to point B from a lot of people. And I want to be that help to other people in turn. It kills me to think that there is somebody who was where I was 5 years ago, but didn't have that entrepreneurial dad who hated Satan's breath in a 9-to-5, or didn't have somebody like Tom Cunningham from Tropical Type who was super generous with his advice. And so maybe I can be that person for you if you are that person. I'm just starting doing something. I'm starting here on YouTube because it's free for you. I know how much even a couple bucks can hurt. Also, I hope it reaches the right people. I think it can on YouTube. So if this is something that you're interested in, maybe you struggle with the same things, the best way that you can follow me is there's a link in the description of this video, and you can sign up for my newsletter. I'll let you know whenever a new video comes out, or anything outside of YouTube you can find there. Maybe I'm on a podcast, maybe I'm doing a course, maybe this, that, and the other. I'm not quite sure yet what this will look like. But hopefully, if you sign up for that newsletter, you can let me know. And that's it, and that's all. We'll catch you in the next.